On behalf of John and myself, welcome everybody to Web 3.0, creating future-ready online communities, brought to you by Grazidi Interactive, Communify, John's company, and Clock Tower Advisors. We are incredibly excited to be having this conversation today. And I don't know about you, John, but I was gratified to see how many people were interested in this as a topic.
Yeah, I think this is an exciting part of community, right? I think if you're a community manager, you've been doing communities for a little bit of time, this is the stuff that makes you really like your job. You're like, here's what we're working on, cutting edge, groundbreaking, pushing the boundaries. And I think that's what Web 3.0 is all about. It's really shaking things up and changing the way things are done.
And you know what, you and I are I guess we qualify as the old guard of online community builders. We've both been at it for a while. I think you even a little bit longer than me. Just some background. I spent, I think, the first part of my career in tech recruiting, but starting around sort of the early 2000s, I started getting into social media platforms and becoming an advocate, for their use for the business world. Around the late 2000s, I started doing some crowdsourced live events that were complemented by community style platforms. And then, I ended up joining an agency around 2013 that was just dedicated to building online communities. And I was hooked from there on out. And I love the space. Founded Clock Tower Advisors back in 2015, where I help organizations from startups up through Fortune 100 companies put together social strategies for both externally facing as well as digital workplace communities. And John, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your background and sort of how you came here. You've had an interesting trip too.
I got dropped into communities. I was working at a gaming company and I told my boss to let me install this thing called vBulletin, which was a messaging board, Web 1.0, right? This was 16 years ago, and we installed this thing and it blew up, a couple 100,000 users all of a sudden, and that sent me to change my title from product manager to community manager, and gone on to build communities for some of the largest companies out there, like Oracle, and working with Google, working with HP, and being part of Grazidi for multiple years underneath them. It was a great experience. And recently, I've started my own company, Communify, where we're developing and building online community management software geared at content creators and community managers alike. And so, yeah, it's more to come. It's still being developed, but yeah, it's great to be here with you, Todd. We always have a great conversation, and Web 3.0 couldn't be a more fun topic for me.
Yeah, and for me too. You were alluding to this a little bit earlier. When we work in online communities for as long as guys like you and I have, this is the exciting stuff. This is the stuff that's on the horizon, or that is really kind of already with us, but not in a really distributed way. This is actually the kind of thing that keeps me energized as a professional. Like, it's the stuff where we haven't figured it out yet, but there's so much potential that's there. And that was one of the reasons that was sort of driving this conversation between the two of us to really start thinking about what are the kernels of goodness that we can get out of the things that we see in Web3 communities right now. And so I think we had talked a little bit about sort of, this is the march of innovation, and that Web3, whatever that is, we're going to talk about that a little bit on the webinar today. How's it useful for building better online communities, and how do we help that increase interactions within our communities, and really even create greater customer centricity through all of that. So I think that's kind of our hope today, John. And I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, but we're certainly open to questions as this conversation evolves today.
Yeah, please get your questions in there. And I do think Web 3.0 is still being defined. Anywhere you read out there, any research you say, Web 3.0, it's this term right now. It's very loosely defined. And we're the ones that are going to set what this is, right? In my mind, we're building Web3. We are community managers. We're community builders. We're on the forefront. We were way ahead. We are Web2. User-generated content, interaction, engagement, social media. That is community and community born. So in my mind, how can community really push us to Web3. And I think we'll be in a great position to show companies and businesses and organizations like, hey, this is what you do with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I think, I've had a bit of a journey with Web3 technologies over the past year, with two communities that I'm working on. Shout out to my friends at Aurora WDC. You guys know who you are, that I've been working with you for some of these efforts. So I've had enough of an exposure to some of the technologies and sort of what they can do, as well as, like you, just reading everything I can get my hands on, looking at some live communities. I think there's, some great people out there. There's Carmen, the community coach, who, shout out to her because she does some great videos about building Web3 communities. So I'm personally fascinated by this, and I think there's a great deal of potential here. I think in terms of our agenda today and sort of how we're going to take this approach, really kind of four sections. Talking about what is Web 3.0. John and I are going to probably fumble around with this a little bit because we're all just trying to get our arms around, what is included and what's outside of the range of what these technologies are and what they mean. And, what was 1.0, what was 2.0, are we still there? Like, how do we get to 3? So how's that going to impact the community space, right? Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I was saying totally. Some people still doing the Web.0, 1.0, experience, right?
Exactly. And then the second part, Web3, is it a fad or a fact? Anybody looking at headlines today is going to see things about how cryptocurrencies are being devalued, that there's been layoffs in the space. Like, what does that actually mean? Should we just say, oh, no, this is a fad, forget about it, it's not important? Or do we need to look at some things that are at the core of that? I think I'm implying the answer there a little bit, John, but it's, I think that there are, definitely some things we need to be looking at. We can't simply ignore what's happening in the space. Part 3, we'll look a little bit at rowing into Web3 from Web2. I kind of like, we didn't build that particular slide, but I kind of like the way that they phrased that. It is sort of like rowing into that. You don't have to jump in all at once. And part 4 is really Web3 and the future of communities online. So what I will say is, like, my point of view about this is going to be, I'm a little less concerned about Web3 communities that are built for the sake of Web3 technologies. So what I mean by that is there are a lot of Web3 kinds of communities like Bored Ape Yacht Club. There's DAOs, things like the Noun DAO, which Carmen, who I mentioned earlier, did a really nice video, shout out for her on that. They're great. I think they're interesting, but I'm also trying to bring the greater majority of community professionals into the fold about some of this, because I think there's issues with the accessibility of the terminology and how to introduce people to this as a topic that I'm really particularly interested in. And John, I don't know if you have any particular point of view you're bringing to this, but
I do too. Like I was going to say, when you were talking earlier, it's like, I think we need to discern between like a Web3 community or, like, say, a crypto community. You might think that, okay, that's a Web3 community, and that's a topic about something that's a piece of Web3, right? Web3 is a larger picture of things, and crypto or NFT communities, which I think are great. And I think you saw this huge spike in them, and then, they die off and the strong ones survive. That's just how natural evolution of communities online go. So I don't think it's something we should be like, oh my God, it was fad. It was fad, but it is fact, right? That when it comes down to it, it was a fad and everybody's jumping in on it. But the facts behind it, that it can really change the way people interact and transverse the community internet, save their data, exchange their data, get their content to them, and allowing for content creators to really be appreciated and have a value. That ties back to the decentralization nature of what people view Web 3.0 as, which I'm a big proponent of having. I've always said your community should be independent, right? It shouldn't be so, employee run, and it should be user generated and customer focused. And that's that decentralized kind of approach to it to some degree.
So John, I'm going to suggest, I think I want to come back to this because I agree. I think that, sort of the fad element of this, and that continues to sort of haunt us a bit, is that the communities that have risen are populated, particularly the Web3 communities that right now are populated by, I'll kind of divide them into two grossly unfair camps: the true believers and the transactional, folks. And the people that just join because they want to buy an NFT and they want to flip it and make some money on it. There's an extrinsic motivation around that I think kind of plays at odds with community building. And those projects in the Web3 space that have figured out how to engage audiences in a way that gives them puzzles, gives them things to think about. It's almost sort of a gaming mentality that they've created around that, which is fine. It's an engagement strategy. They're the ones that I think are going to survive through this. The ones that are just, trying to turn a quick buck, as all, web trends have been over the past decades. I think that they're gonna struggle and fail eventually. So
I think it's a learning opportunity though for all of us. Though we're seeing this fad go up and these things go up, and seeing what's failing and what is sticking. Though there are certain things that are sticking, right? And you're seeing companies like, I was reading an article about Starbucks the other day, reimagining and relaunching their customer retention program, they call it, but it's the rewards program, right? When you use your Starbucks card, and being able to track usages using data and AI to give them sales and discounts that are automated, not known to them. And then they're also going to be like going back into the Starbucks kind of IP catalog and start to release NFTs. So if you're there's, I don't know if you guys go to Starbucks a lot, there's different color cards you do get. If you spend more money at Starbucks, you get like a gold, platinum, silver type of cards, and you get more benefits. And they're going to be giving away NFTs to those members that participate in that with limited edition items and NFTs, which is a great way to connect and bring some engagement. And they're really looking for people to spend, right? So I think it's a great strategy for a company like Starbucks.
So this is a great point for us to start giving a few definitions of things, because there may be people that have joined us that aren't aware of what NFTs are versus fungible tokens. Some of this is the terminology I was telling about. It's like there's a barrier here to be overcome, and I'd be curious, those of you out in the audience who are just coming at this for the first time and you've joined us to get a little more familiar with this, give us a shout out in the chat. I'm watching the chat here as we go, and I know we've got some folks from Grizzly who are keeping an eye on things. But let's go ahead and jump over here to this idea of Web 1 versus Web 2 versus Web 3. I think this bears some defining for those of us coming at this. I've got my point on this, but John, is there anything that kind of stands out for you about sort of this progression from Web 1 to 2 to 3? Like what's top of mind when you see sort of this evolution here?
That it is an evolution, right? And it's going to keep going. And what excites me is I don't know what comes, but I know I've been through all of it. And I've been growing as a practitioner, as a community practitioner over the years, going through these generations of the web. And like when I see some of the things I read about Web 3.0 that defined it, it's like, hey, we're already kind of doing that, but community's always been on the forefront, right? So wouldn't be surprised if a lot of community guys out here are already kind of like doing some of this stuff, right? And you not even realize that defines the Web 3.0 to some degree. And you just need to know, like Todd said, the terminology, what people are calling some of these things now, changing the definition, but they mean the same thing we were doing in the past, like cloud computing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I feel really strongly that Web 3 represents the spirit of experimentation that communities and community builders have always had. We always want to try new things, and as you said, like I think that some of the things that exist conceptually in the Web 3 space such as NFTs, I think correspond back to some of the reward mechanisms that we've been working with in communities for years, such as gamification.
Yeah.
So the opportunities to turn these digital reward, what we were previously calling badges, into something that is on the blockchain, something verifiably somebody's possession within that space is interesting, and that has other things attached to it, like smart contracts. And don't worry, we're going to get into the definition of some of these things as we go.
Smart contracts, man. I had to look that one up and read into that a little bit, but like, it's something we've done before. It's just a new name for it.
Yeah,
but it's very cool stuff, though.
So just really briefly, so Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Web 1 is really what we're talking about, was created by Tim Berners-Lee back in 1989. This is static web content linked together by hyperlinks, right? This is just, web pages. It's arguably, it's not even search engines. Search engines don't really come into play until Web 2. So it's about, delivering information, very centralized infrastructure. Everything was, on standalone client server kind of setups, in people's, get my server in my garage, and that's where my website is hosted on, right? Oh, yeah. And so I
built them a bunch of Dell computers on IKEA racks in an office, right? And that was our website,
very
right?
Early primitive stuff. I remember doing like tape backups of stuff in my office, crazy stuff. Web 2 is where we finally get into, like, around 2004 or so. It's a term coined by Tim O'Reilly. It's dynamic content and user input. So it's social networks, social media, sort of the world we're living in right now. So Web 2.0, you're soaking in it. This is where we're able to connect people to people, to ideas, to content, but it's all really on sort of these centralized owners of that content. And so, Facebook and Twitter own these things. And one of the things to understand and think about with Web3 is that world came about because of a dissatisfaction with these few players owning more and more of the online conversations that are there. And to that extent, I really think online communities fit very well with the Web3 world, because many of us that work in this space are all about, and this gets to the relevancy of one of the questions that somebody just asked, Madhur Sodhi, what is the relevance of Web 3.0 and online communities? I think online communities fit so well because we are also part of that desire to decentralize experience from these big social platforms that have dominated so much of the conversations that are out there.
I think you're right on target with that. With communities where I've seen where they've expanded, contracted out to social media. Now, like, you're seeing people wanting smaller focused communities, and they might not be on your brand site, which has been hard in the past. So now you're able to, communities are able to be anywhere. It's decentralized. They're on Slack, they're on Stack Overflow, on Discord, they're on Reddit, there's huge networks and communities building there. And Web 3.0 and communities, as community manager, there's technology now allows you to interact across all those platforms and be where the customer is, not necessarily have to, bring the customer to you all the time. This goes against some of my earlier teachings, right? That you want to bring them all into your brand. And yes, you do want to have your central location, but the reality is those people want to feel free or independent and have some of these conversations on some of these other established networks. So that's where this one term that comes in. I saw is cross blockchain. We'll have to talk about that term in a little bit.
I love that, John, and you scooped me on that one. So I got you on smart contracts. We're going to have to talk about the cross blockchain and what that means. I mean, you're right. There's a variety of terms attached to that. Sorry for the eye chart here for those of you that are watching on a small smartphone or something. But the things that exist in Web3, you're going to see some terms like ubiquity, the semantic web, the intelligent web, centralized and decentralized web, metaverse, artificial intelligence, as a part of this. I really see, in some senses, I feel like Web3 is like this mixed bag of all of these different new technology elements or evolutions sort of crashing together at once and being sort of made into these different recipes. Like there's a lot of mixing and matching that's going on right now. Your community platform may use decentralized identity management, but it's not using NFTs, or it's not using anything to do with a cryptocurrency. Maybe you're using AI-based tools to help with intelligent search within the space. Or maybe you're doing something to do with the Internet of Things, and you're expressing some of these things in your community that represent something in the real world, and what sensors are saying about some kind of equipment that's operating, but you need to be able to talk about it in a community context. I don't know what your reading is kind of brought through with it, John, but this stuff is fascinating, but it's also so diverse that it's a little hard to put your finger on.
That's why I was saying that Web 3.0 term is still really being defined. That's why you see it's just kind of a hodgepodge of terms over there. I was reading that it was initially called Semantic Web. That's what they wanted to call this version of it. And they're like, no, we have to rebrand to Web 3.0. So they actually made a concerted, make it sound a little bit better than Semantic Web, because that went through me for a loop too. That was just about being able to share data in a readable fashion by AI. But some of these things, having modern responsive web, these are still things some people are struggling and working today, right? So many companies are trying to update, only portions of their site does this, right? Not having dynamic and social web. How many companies don't have communities still, or don't participate very good on social? So I think there's still a lot that companies need to think about in the Web 2.0 phase before they just say, okay, we're doing Web 3 and this is our Web 3 projects and initiatives. You might want to try to get some of the Web 2 things down a little good, and then think how you can weave some of these things in, right? Like say metaverse and digital worlds. This is a new term for virtual worlds. Think Second Life, and these type of things that have been on 24 Virtual Builder have been out for quite a few years. But I think now the tools are they work better, they're affordable and accessible, which really changes things. Where the only person who could afford it was like me, working at $1 billion company, was building like an on-24 virtual presence, which was precursor to like metaverse. So really I'm thinking about metaverse. What are you thinking about metaverse and Web 3.0? I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Yeah, I'm thinking of it a lot, and so I when I look at sort of these sort of nameplates, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, you're right. I almost try to think of it in terms of these expanding, almost like an artist's palette. Like if you're a fan of the old Bob Ross show with the painting guy from PBS, you had sort of like the little, he had his little palette, and he was like mixing colors and doing happy little clouds and all that. I think with Web 1, you've got this really tiny little palette of just some basic colors to work with. Web 2, it's a little bit bigger. And Web 3, we've got more colors on the palette. There's a lot more we can do with this. And of course, that's, more choice means more confusion and more churn about what's possible. But it also lets us do some really incredible different sorts of things. And so metaverse is one of those new colors on the palette that's so amazing to be able to look at and put into place. I've been looking at a lot of different virtual world kind of spaces. I'm a big fan of that. I was in Second Life back in the day, checking that out when corporations were trying to set up their presence.
I used to be the sim master at Electronic Arts, man. I love that stuff.
Dude, that's great. Yeah. So like we both came out of a gaming background, from that perspective, and so I'm enthusiastic about these virtual spaces as a place for business value. But I think what's been exciting about the kinds of virtual worlds that have been created, they're now being created with a thoughtfulness about, this needs to be an enclosed, safe space, so that when we have meetings of people that are interested in this topic, it's not being invaded by other people that have an axe to grind, or that just want to grief you, or cause different kinds of issues for you. That it's being created as a dedicated space for those kinds of conversations that you're trying to convene. And it's so immersive and different than a text-based community that so many of us are used to. Whether you're living in a Discord, instance, or you're in something like Koros, which is kind of a
But you're
revised.
talking about voice communicate. We see what was that service that came up a few years ago about voice communities, and it went and it was popular for like a
Oh, you're
couple months.
talking
And
Clubhouse. Clubhouse.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Clubhouse, right? Do people really want to sit and talk to a bunch of random people though? I don't. It's hard
Well,
sometimes. I do. I'm a gamer. I go on Xbox. I talk to people. I like that type of communication, but that's why I struggle personally with metaverse. I think it's super cool. I like it. I want to build something with it. I want to do something in the space for sure. But I struggle really say, okay, well, what's the ROI for the company on it, right? So,
well, I'll tell you a story about a way that I think it can be really helpful. There's a platform. I'm not going to give them an advertisement, but there's a virtual worlds platform that I like. And if you message me, I'll tell you who I'm thinking about. But they basically had created an online space just for open networking. Anybody could kind of come in, check it out, see what the environment was like. And what I really liked about it is I was able to move into the environment with my avatar, because it's almost a game-like experience. You're entering somewhere between a 2D and a 3D environment, where you can start looking at other people. You can move around a space. These spaces are architectural in a sense, in almost a physical world sense, but you can build wild architectures with these spaces. But what I liked, what I thought was immersive and useful about that space that could be paired with our general definition of online communities as being like a news feed or a discussion forum or a chat room. I think having those immersive spaces like that was exemplified by me being able to walk into this place, and I was walking by some people that were having a conversation over to one side of me, and they said, "Oh, hey Todd, how are you today?" And I could hear it in my headphones. I was able to, turn and look, and it was much more of a real world experience of somebody greeting me in that space. And I think, one of the things as community builders, we struggle with this an awful lot.
yeah. Okay, I'm totally vibing with you on this now. So, for instance, if I had like a virtual community manager or who is a person, but he just hangs out there, or if I had a couple, I had people that are greeters, or if I had like a knowledge guy, he's in this room over there, he's giving a lecture, and you can go, it's kind of like going to a webinar, right? But you can have a lecture over there. And I think I get the picture now, where how you could really drive engagement and connection, or use it for customer support. That's what I was trying to think about, is like ROI, and go, that's the enterprise side of me, going back to like, how are we gonna save money or earn money with this thing. But
yeah, I totally love that you're thinking that way. But yeah, I mean, so think about like how frustrated we get when we have to get on customer support through a chat window. First I got to go through the chat bot, and then I got to talk to a live rep, and then I got to explain my problem to them. How much easier if I can get into more of a 3D environment. I see a representation of another person there. They see me as a representation of a person. There's immediately, I think, more empathy that's involved in that proximal, like this virtual proximity to something that's represented as a person. I think we're just wired to feel more empathy in those kinds of situations than we are in sort of these text-based exchanges that we have. So so one of the questions are, what are the most crucial elements that Web3 powered communities need? I think immersion, is one of those elements that Web3 can help, certainly from that perspective.
I think also one of the things that Web3, or we can go to the next slide and keep talking if you want to see what's on there, just for things. So we can talk a little about some of these things. I'll take a couple and you take a couple. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
I know you like NFT stuff and crypto, so I'll talk a little bit about like my blockchains and cross blockchain, and a little bit about DAOs. I'm learning more and more about DAOs. They're still very undefined, decentralized organizations, and but blockchain is really about how your data is saved, and it's how it's processed in a secure fashion. It really, for me, I was reading about the concept of cross blockchain, where your data is actually portable across multiple these networks, right? So your data is, you keep your profile with you. So if you go to another community, like people can see, like, say I join another community, they don't know that I used to like be like the champion over on the other community, and I, have all these YouTube posts and all this stuff. I come in there, I'm like a blank slate. But in the future, you'll like save your identity and move from community to community and save that your credibility, right? A lot of responding and trusting people's answers online is about what their credibility is. How often do they know what this person's talking about, or is this his first person's post and he doesn't know anything, he just made it up, right? Don't know. So blockchain is going to, I think, really enable for you to keep your identity and keep your data yourself, and carry it across multiple networks in the future. What do you think about NFTs? I have a lot of stuff to say about NFTs, but I know you really like them and you have a lot more experience. So you take the NFT stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much more experience I have in you. We're all learners, within this space. But the one of the things that you mentioned is that access and being able to have this decentralized identity management. Like, I can take my identity in a virtual wallet, or whatever you want to call it, but it's basically a way to take all the things that I've collected over time, whether it's cryptocurrencies or NFTs. These things can be kept in something called a virtual wallet, and I can maybe take them and use those to authenticate against another community. And so I can join communities that are relevant to me without having to go through what's been sort of the usual Web 2.0 approach of like, okay, I joined this community, I've got to upload an avatar, I've got to, kind of fill out my profile about who I am and what I'm interested in and why I'm interested in this particular community. I think that portability of information about me can be far more relevant with things like NFTs. And NFTs, for those of you who are new to this, stand for non-fungible tokens. Means that they don't stand for any particular unit of value, unlike a fungible token, which is something like a Bitcoin. So a non-fungible token is something that could have monetary value, but it's variable. It could be a piece of art, it could be music, it could be architectural plans. Often it's been used as an avatar in online spaces. And so me being able to authenticate to a community using my virtual wallet and allowing me to pick and choose what kinds of NFTs I want to be visible in that community that kind of talk about my interests and viability. I don't think that ability to pick and choose is quite there yet. I could be wrong about that. I'm really interested in how that works in practice. And I if anybody has examples of that, please send them.
It's like a verifiable email signature, right? Everybody used to put like, I'm MSC certified, or I got my Cisco certification, or, I got this, these different certifications, VMware, Salesforce certifications. People will put those in their email signatures. I think it lost its value because anybody can put that stuff in your signatures. But if you had these NFTs from like a Salesforce certification engineer NFT, there's no faking that, right? You're not just gonna, get that by going on the internet and downloading it, right? You're gonna have to earn it, which I think is a great way to connect gamification, right? And NFTs, which I haven't seen anybody do yet, really about using gamification to leverage to award NFTs.
We're working on it. So like the two of the communities that I'm in, that's definitely in the roadmap plan. So the communities that we're doing this on are basically WordPress based Buddy Boss platform communities. And we're playing with these things called POAPs, which are tokens that represent attendance. It actually stands for proof of attendance protocols. And so you can, if somebody attends your webinar, I can sign up and I can get a POAP and I can keep that in my wallet.
Yes, we had to do that manual. That's all been like manual work in the past, right?
Right. So now, so think about NFTs. I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk, who's got some really good, conversations about this online, whether you love him or hate him, he's in this space and thinking about it a lot. He talks about NFTs as almost think of them as like trading cards, or think of them as concert t-shirts or a ticket stub to an event. These are all things that then you carry with you that express your personality in online spaces. And so having those things, having NFTs that are representative of your experience and your interest, not only helps somebody get to know you a little bit better, provided those things are visible and transparent within a community you happen to join, but also there's other interesting implications around these, around things like smart contracts, which I mentioned earlier. An NFT can have built into it a smart contract so that if it's ever traded for a monetary value, that some percentage of that money can go back to the originator of the NFT. So if we want to talk about ROI for communities, think about, like, what if you sourced a series of NFTs as original artwork by some local artists that you had, and then that NFT, those become rewards within the community for participation or activity. They become equity that can be used to vote. That's getting a little bit into the DAO, the idea of the decentralized autonomous network. But then let's say somebody leaves that community and they decide to sell that NFT on an open market. It gets bought. You could build into that NFT's smart contract the ability to give money back to that artist, or to that community, or to a cause, or to the community itself to help perpetuate it. So I'm not saying there's going to be a lot of dollars around something like that, but what if it takes off? What if it becomes very, very popular and expensive? So, I mean, I get really interested in sort of how contracts could have a profound impact on the use of NFTs as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, you can really, what we had a hard time doing with authenticating. Now that it's connected to your blockchain, it's real. You're able to do rewards and recognition programs, or even payment systems in the consumer market, looking at getting creators paid for the content they produce on your behalf, the likes and the user content. These technologies will allow you to flow NFTs into crypto, right? So everybody knows cryptocurrency, but what the markets are up, they're down. But it has like a lot of basis of they're all kind of connected and monetized off that, right?
So fad or fact, here's one of the things that I think you need to be aware of if you're doing some community building and you're going to do anything with cryptocurrencies or NFTs. There's something called a gas fee for creating these kinds of tokens. There's also implications about the use of energy for the creation of these things. It takes energy to build these things on the blockchain, because the blockchain is basically this network in which all this data is stored. And it can become quite heavy duty and expensive to do it. What I would say to make you feel a little bit better about that, there's not just one blockchain. It's not just Ethereum or Bitcoin or anything like that. There are alternative blockchains that are out there that have lower gas fees, or that are doing some kind of carbon offset credits, or they're finding other ways to mint
carbon credits. That's the new thing I've been reading about, right? That's an interesting concept. People buying back carbon offsets.
Yeah. And I had some early experience with this because at my house we've got solar arrays, and for a while, until the government decided that the energy companies weren't making enough money, they were letting you sell carbon offset credits to corporations on an open auction market. And so it was basically paying me money back for being involved with that. I think, attaching that to, making things carbon neutral or carbon positive, using those kinds of buybacks is a way to mitigate, some of the energy costs that are involved with this.
And then we touched a little bit about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. It really goes back. I like the concept of, like, I was reading about people that have NFTs get voting rights, right? Decentralized community, where, if you think about decentralized community, I've tried to run this inherently by, what should we do? What should we feature in the community? What sections should we build? And getting feedback directly from my community members on how I evolve my communities over years. But DAO allows them to actually like a voting system, right? And the more useful you are, the more points you have, the more NFT value you might have, like, influences your vote rights, and which is kind of interesting to think about. But what are your thoughts about DAO? And I'm still learning about it. I don't know how it's really going to influence community just yet. I can see more clear with blockchain and NFT, and but not so much DAO. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in them. I think that they harken back to the idea of a cooperative. And so
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a different model than most corporate, kinds of models for owning and running an organization. This is a type of organization that's run by everybody who has a piece of the pie, everybody that joins, maybe buys an NFT or, whatever. I was just watching recently, Carmen, the community coach. I'm giving her she should give me a a kickback or something
Free book or something.
the advertisement. She's amazing. You should watch her stuff. She did a neat piece recently on a DAO called Noun. It's noun.wtf. That's a real website that does auctions of NFTs, and it's sort of self-perpetuating, and people that are participating in this space, it's an experiment. They basically created a collective where they're trying to create avatar communities, and so they're randomly generating these avatars for use. As I understand it, they're all open source, so anybody can take advantage of them in the community. They do daily auctions of these, but they found a way to kind of create a mission for their experimentation and what they're doing. And everybody that's within this space has and is participating has voting rights about what they do and how they run the rules of the DAO, that it works together. So I'm fascinated by how these work in practice. I haven't seen enough of them yet to form some strong opinions about them, but I'm really intrigued by the elements of things like having equity within a community. So based on my participation, I get rewards in the form of NFTs that give me then voting rights within the space. I can bear that NFT, for different sorts of uses.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's where the connection and community really is, right? Coming back to reward, reputation, and incentivizing engagement, right? So if you really think about a lot of these tools, it's about incentivizing engagement on your platform, incentivizing by your customers about your brand, right? And this allows you to do it decentralized. That way, they're not necessarily have to do it on your website. It can be anywhere that these people are participating, spreading the word about your brand, driving activity. They're able to be compensated as part of this pie, right? And really run your organization differently than when you had hiring a bunch of employees to be able to spread the word out there. Now you're able to rely on I was reading that there's over 50 million creators online now, people creating content, creating stuff, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, the slew is on there, articles, short form, long form writing. It's amazing what you can find in communities these days. So I think this is all just great stuff. So let's move to the next slide then. Let's see what's on the next one.
Yeah. I get hung up on the slides. So, the one thing I'll say about sort of this idea of the evolution of online communities with Web3, you and I've been talking about, different elements that could be applied. And I think, some of these we've alluded to here. But I think, it's not a binary decision. Like it's a false choice to say like, wow, I've got to jump in and create these Web3, communities right now. I've got to build a Web3 community from scratch. Or, you know what, I'm going to wait until Web3 is a proven technology, and then I'll go into it. By that time, you're too late to the party, and you're losing competitive advantage. I think anytime there's a leap forward, with these kinds of technologies, that's an opportunity and an invitation for your organization to experiment and try some of these new things. And that's where I get excited about this is we are living somewhere between Web 2 and Web 3 right now. This is liminal space, meaning we can play here. There's things that we should be trying in any of our existing communities. And as whether you're in a large corporation or you're in a little startup company, it's all equal footing right now. It's not a matter of how much money to put into it because the technologies aren't that expensive to get rolling, which is why we're seeing such a thriving startup space in Web3 right now.
Yeah, no, I think it really opens up some of the playing field, right? But you and me both work with a lot of brands over the years. Like it allows you to really like for a while, I think things got a little stagnant, like new things to try and to experiment. A mentor of mine used to always tell me to fail fast, right? Well, here's your chance to really fail fast, find what works for you and what sticks, because it's not all going to work, right? But give it a try, right? Rewards-based economy. You're in the consumer-based space and you're not looking at, rewarding your influencers, then you're probably behind right now, right? If you're in the enterprise space and you haven't looked at intelligent systems and AI reporting, you're probably a little bit behind right now, right? Metaverse, if you're in gaming and you're in the consumer market, you should be all over this right now, like some of the big brands are, just to be for brand recognition alone, right? Being on some of these top metaverse platforms, buying land, being there, being a part of it, you're there, your brand's there. It's a pretty easy way to get your name out there.
Yeah, and an example of a company that I think is doing this really well right now is DC Comics. They're doing these the kind of the Batman's cowl, different NFTs for that, and it's going super well. Like, they've done a really good job of energizing the community, giving them creative input to some of their other stuff that they make. They're using it across different kinds of platforms and expressions of their media brand and what they do. And it's working out, really, really well for them as an expression. I think one of the things that I'll mention here, that has come about as part of this evolution is, and I don't know if you've noticed this, John, but there's almost a toxic reaction to anybody mentioning NFTs. This came up on a community that I'll leave nameless, but it's in our space, and they were going to create these, an NFT program. And I was shocked by what a violent reaction a large percentage of people had towards it. It's a scam, it's a Ponzi scheme, and just an immediate visceral reaction. Like, for me, it was a little shocking, like, because I love the community professional space, because there's so many open-hearted people, in the space. Like, we get along really well. It's not that we're care bears and all, just want to hug each other all the time. But I think that it's generally, I think, a progressive in terms of embracing new technologies, kind of space. And to get such a violent reaction, even from that crowd, was a little bit of a shell shock for me.
I think because people have manipulated and taken advantage of this NFT spike in the beginning, right? Where good things come, bad people come as well, right? They're looking to make that quick buck, to flip it. And unfortunately, there has been, problems with it. And they hit the news, and, crypto is in the news, and so it just makes, like, for a bright glowing headline, and I think people jump onto that. But I think the concepts are still there, and especially around NFTs. I think for brands that have a recognizable brand image, or product, it's going to be undeniable that you're going to build NFTs. You just got to get over it now. If you have previous long-standing IP in your design, you're going to be making NFTs. Your clothing company and a clothing brand, you're going to be making virtual assets and NFTs as well, right? I think this is just something that people will accept in the future. I remember my first one I did when I was working for The Sims. I did a contest, virtual contest, clothing submissions, and then voted, and then I did a catwalk, and then the winner, we actually made the dress in the store. It was H&M. So we made this little red dress, and then we put it in the game as well, too. So I think these are some of the earliest concepts of what we're seeing of Web 3.0, of how really you're connecting online and offline, this tangible thing that you win now is something you can touch.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, applying NFTs to the gaming world, or a gaming centric kind of audience, so much easier, because I think we've already got this concept of creating and trading digital goods in 3D game spaces, in Minecraft or in Fortnite, or wherever you happen to hang your hat and spend some time. Hey, quick shout out to Craig Fleischer. Yeah, of course I'm a DC geek and a Marvel nerd, so I know that's shocking.
Totally, we guys spent many years playing video games.
So, John, we got just a couple of minutes left. I think we had promised some maybe some practical steps to getting started if you're thinking about getting going here. So maybe we should kind of go over those and try to address any kind of wrap up questions that we've got.
Yeah. So, geez, do your research, get out there and read and get involved. Go try some of these like metaverse communities, see what people are doing, see if you can get a little bit of budget and try it. Doesn't hurt to try things out. Right. NFTs are a real thing in terms of brand recognition, I think. But the other part is not forgetting that a big part of Web 3.0 is your data, what you're doing with your data, how you're reporting on your data, how you're using your data. Are you using AI to interpret that data and make your decisions moving forward? Are you able to use your AI influenced data to recommend data or content to other people? Are you able to use AI to do predictive analysis in their search? Right. Some of these things are attainable now, and these are those are Web 3.0 for sure. And those are things that people can really do today, right? And be on that path of rowing into Web 3.0. You don't got to do all that stuff and have your own metaverse next week, but look at how you're using AI in your strategy. How are you using your data? How are you collecting it? Are you using smart contracts, right? Are you using, decentralized login IDs, stuff like that is accessible today, I think, where people can get going.
Yeah, I don't think there's a wrong answer about where to get started. I had a very wise college professor that once said, "Start anywhere and go anywhere." It's the journey that will teach you as you proceed. One of the things that stuck with me, like if you do happen to be running or starting a dedicated Web3 community, like around NFTs or something like that. My observation about the space coming at it as a longtime Web 2 guy is, as John said, you got to do your homework. I think there's not a shortcut to identifying the purpose of your community, how you're going to engage people, what they're going to get out of it. You need to take a member-centric approach to thinking about what they need, what their journey is going to look like as they get into the space, and then how you're going to track the metrics of that. John knows that better than anybody. What does that dashboard need to look like to tell if the community's healthy, if you're meeting the KPIs, and if your members are seeing value in what's happening? I think all three of those levels need to be addressed. And then, I think because this is such a new space, one of the things that would be great if all the community builders could do out there that have tuned into this or are watching this on the replay is share your notes. This is collaborative. It's very much in the spirit of Web3. Tell us what you're working on. Tell us what you're stuck on. Tell us what you're hoping to do, and let's solve it as a global team. That loves this space and believes in the future of communities and what we can be as a result of it.
Yeah, no, I think the numbers, ROI, tying it to business, that's something that no one's really shown just yet, right? I think that's the undiscoverable play out there, but there is a way to really show in return on your investment. Like, think about your core company goals and how can you really tie back these Web 3.0 activities, whether it's using AI, metaverses, NFTs, cryptos, whatever we laid out there. Okay, what would be the impact on your business? And then that's how you build a business plan around it, and that's how you get funding or budget from your company, right? Is come up with some short obtainable goals, right, that you can show a quick win, and something that can move pretty quickly. No one wants to take a gamble on a project that's going to take 18 months or a year to see things. Was like, what can I do this quarter to see if I can push it forward a little bit? And I think if you keep doing that, you can keep your community growing. And I think this is just the growth evolution of your community. Like, if you have this community, it's been around for a few years, average length 7 years. Your community's probably been around for 7 years, right? So you really need to think how you can keep these people engaged, how you can keep your audience, there's so many places they can go now. So if you're not thinking about what's next, your audience is going to be trickling away.
I love it. John, we got 3 questions left here that I don't think we've addressed. I'd like to hit them rapid fire if we could.
I got it right here.
Yeah, number 1 was is the quality of interaction through semantic web comprehensively dependent on the evolution of AI or machine learning? And so like when we talk about semantic web, we're talking about sort of a machine readable web where you can, the search terms basically can understand the context of a question, or they can understand the parts of a website or a community, and depending on AI or machine learning to really understand and interpret what somebody's searching for or what their questions are. I think it's a key question. I'm not the developer that's getting into some deep black magic for me, but I feel like the two are partners. I don't think you can do one well without the other, and that is going to be dependent to a large extent. John,
you start moving away from like digital communities where it's totally imagery on the site and all the text is imagery. It's like making sure that your website is really readable, so making sure you have the appropriate metadata assigned for all your images and boxes. Make sure the text is in a readable format, so because as you're getting crawled, you're getting indexed, you're getting searched. This goes back to SEO optimization, a whole other rat's nest of stuff. But making sure your site and you're set up for the future, because AI and AI search engines are just becoming more and more prevalent for sure.
Yep. And Matthias Vleeming had a question as well. Hi, Matthias, great to see you. He says, do you think DAOs could replace boards and decision-making of trade or professional associations in the long run to make it truly member community led? I think so. I would agree.
I could see like DAO similar to like a union, essentially, right? That's really, you would have that organization that would, by being part of it and contribute to it, would give you votes and rights to determine how the organization pursued, their agenda out in the world, no matter what it was. So yeah. I do think they will one and the same. They will become, your board will be a DAO and a DAO will be a board. I could definitely see that.
Excellent. We had one other question from Sukhwinder Singh. How can brand communities prepare for evolving community space with the emergence of Web3? I think we've been kind of alluding to that, but to get more specific about it, I think if you are an enterprise brand and you're looking at these things, look at what some of the other brand leaders have been doing in this space. A lot of them are issuing NFTs. Look for the successes as well as the notable failures that are out there, and set aside some area of the organization to innovate and to try to build these new things and to try them as experiments. I think so many enterprises don't do anything for fear of doing something wrong. And I think it's only with that willingness to experiment that they're going to be able to move forward.
Yeah, I think you guys, community managers right now, you can hop in metaverses. There's multiple sandboxes that you can jump in and join and get your brand with minimal investment, right? Get on their blockchain, get your logo out there, get that awareness, try it out. You don't have to get a big, huge plot. You'll figure out what that means. You go over there, but there's different size grids of spaces. You want a big ad, you want a little ad, right? So if you're a big company, you have a big old plot. If you're a little one, you get the little tiny square. So get a little square, right? And see like, okay, what can I do with this, and try it out. And like I said earlier, if you have visual IP with your company, you should be creating NFTs right now. In my mind, there's no two ways about it. You should be creating, and if you have visual IP identity stuff, that you should be creating, NFTs associated with that. And I do think the way B2B people can take effect of it is around the education and training. I think that's the easiest correlation, by having NFTs for certification badges and those, where you'd have to go through certain hoops, be part of certain things, and you can layer multiple steps on an NFT with their smart contracts, right? So I think that would be, for that question.
Cool. Well, I think we're almost out of time here. There was a question from Boston about community earning equity or NFTs or tokens, the right way to do that for traditional venture-backed company, or does it need to be actual equity? I don't know the answer to that. I think, I've thought about it in terms of NFTs for offering voting rights within an organization. Whether that becomes actual equity, maybe, I think when I'm talking about equity within communities, it's about sort of just being able to vote on directions in a DAO sense. But But as far as, actual financial equity, I don't know how that works. It'd probably be something built into the smart contracts.
Yeah, I think it goes into the smart contracts and goes into influencers trying to get paid for their contribution into that, right? But they're earning equity. We've been doing that I built like a gamification system where you get points and you can buy stuff with it, I think 10 years ago, right? So it's not necessarily new, but we're just doing it in an automated, intelligent fashion. It was very hard for me to build that system. These technologies allow you to do things that we did 10 years ago, but now do them like overnight instead of this being a 3-month project, right? So that's the real benefit.
And John, we've run this right up to the top of the hour. Talk about, I hope we've been able to talk about some things that are useful to those of you that tuned in. I had a great time talking with you, John. It's as always, it's a pleasure to riff and to think about what the future of communities is with Web3.
No, thank you so much. It's super fun to talk about this stuff, right? This is the cutting edge, right? This is where if you want to make a difference, you can try to really make a difference with this new stuff.
If any of you are interested in continuing the conversation, John and I can both be found on LinkedIn. We also have our Twitter addresses that I'll put up on the screen here really quickly. I'll come back here for that. Please reach out to us. We'd love to continue that conversation and move on. And in the meantime, tell us about your experiments, tell us what you're doing, and we will see you out there on the web. Yeah, definitely. Like, send us your messages, talk to us. We love talking community. So if you ask a question, you're definitely going to get a good answer. And have a good day, guys. Thanks, everybody.